He jerks the rope hard, wrapping it twice around the post as the horse slams its weight back, leg torn open, blood slicking the dust. It should have gone down already, but it does, keeps fighting, like it's got something left to lose. Calder braces, breath cutting short, lungs still burned from that fire years back, never healed right. Then he sees it. Beneath the blood, a mark, not cattle, not trade, cut deep and wrong. The horse jerks toward him, chooses him. Hoofbeats roll over the ridge, too many. He knows what it means. Cutting it free invites them in. Leaving it means becoming the man he swore he wouldn't be. And this time, whatever he chooses won't just cost him the horse. Before we ride deeper into this tale, subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss another journey through the dust, danger, and legends of the Wild West. Now, back to the trail. Calder planted his boots deeper and pulled again, the rope burning hot across his palm as the horse lunged sideways hard enough to shake the post. Dust jumped. Blood ran fresh down the animal's hind leg, bright against the gray-brown dirt. It should have folded by now. Any sane beast would have. But this one fought with a strange, furious purpose, head high, nostrils blown wide, as if pain mattered less than whatever waited behind it. Easy, Calder said, though there was nothing easy in the sound. His chest tightened with the effort. The old burn in his lungs caught like dry bark taking spark. He turned his face aside and coughed once into his shoulder, sharp and hollow, then stepped back in before the horse could tear loose. One hand on the rope, one on the knife at his belt, close enough now to see the split in the flesh above the hoof. Not barbed wire, not a fall, clean in one place, ragged in another, like it had run half-wounded and kept running long after it should have dropped. Then he saw the mark again, low on the flank, partly buried under mud and blood, not a ranch brand. Not one he'd seen in any sale yard from here to Abilene. It wasn't made to be read at a glance. It was crooked, cut deep, almost hidden inside older hair growth. A shape burned into the hide that looked less like ownership than warning. The horse flinched when Calder reached toward it, then stopped. Not settled, chosen. Its wild eye fixed on him, and for one strange second the animal leaned toward his hand instead of away from it. Trust from a creature in that much pain was a harder thing to hold than fear. Calder knew that better than most. Hoofbeats rolled again from the ridge. Closer now, he looked up. 3 riders, maybe 4, black against the hard noon glare, too far to make out faces, near enough to know they were watching. They did not hurry down, did not wave. Just sat their saddles and waited as if the next move belonged to him. The horse trembled under his hand. From the barn came the slap of a screen door and Eli Voss's uneven stride across the yard. Calder heard the limp before he saw the man. What in God's name did you drag in now? Calder did not look back. Found it at the dry wash. Eli stopped beside the trough, eyes narrowing at the blood, then at the ridge. That ain't strayed stock. No. Eli spat into the dirt. Then leave it. Whoever marked it will come for it, and I promise you they won't come asking polite. Calder slid the knife free. The horse tensed at the glint of steel. Eli's voice sharpened. I said leave it. Calder crouched lower, speaking to the horse, not the man. If I leave it tied like this, it dies. That may be the safer bargain. Safer, the word sat wrong. Calder looked past the animal to the far fence line where the posts still stood blackened in places, half replaced, half remembered. Wind moved through them with a thin whistle. Years gone, and he could still smell smoke some mornings when the air turned. Still woke with his chest locked and his hand reaching for things that weren't there. The riders started down at last, slow, certain. The horse threw its head once, then struck the dirt with its good leg and nearly went to its knees. Something slipped loose from the knot of hair near its mane and fell into the dust by Calder's boot. Not leather, not tack. A small rawhide strip tied there on purpose. He picked it up. Wrapped inside was a folded scrap, oil-darkened and stiff with sweat. No words on the outside, just the same burned symbol pressed into the hide. Eli saw it and went pale beneath the sun. Calder. The riders kept coming. The horse shuddered against the rope. And Calder, with the knife in one hand and the hidden message in the other, understood that cutting the animal free would not end the trouble. It would choose his side in it. Calder did not open the rawhide strip. Not yet. The riders were halfway down the slope now, horses picking their way through shale and scrub with the easy balance of men who had crossed rough country all their lives. They did not rush because they did not need to. The wounded horse stood between them and the yard like a question already answered. Eli Voss took one backward step toward the house. "Tie it off and walk away," he said. "Let them claim it and be done." Calder kept his eyes on the riders. If they meant only to claim it, they'd have come down sooner. "That's meant to comfort me. It wasn't meant for you." The horse staggered again, rope biting the post, one hind leg quivering from the effort of holding weight it no longer should have borne. Calder could hear the strain in the animal now, the thin, tearing sound of breath too fast, the small knock of a hoof slipping in blood-slick dirt. It had run long and hard before he found it at the dry wash, long enough to split itself open on stone, long enough to drag fear across half the valley. He slid the rawhide strip into his coat pocket and stepped close. "Easy," he murmured. One hand lifted, slow. The horse's eye rolled white. He kept his voice level and low, the way his father once had over a spooked colt in a rainstorm years before the fire took the man, the house, and most of what came before. Calder remembered the hand more than the face now. Large, steady, burns scored across two knuckles from forge work, never hurried. He put his palm against the horse's neck. Hot, trembling. Alive, the riders reached the lower yard but stopped beyond the trough, still mounted, still silent. There were 4 of them after all. Apache men, lean and watchful, their faces unreadable beneath the brim of shadow and sun. No rifles raised, no threats spoken. That made Eli more nervous than gunfire would have. The eldest sat a gray horse with one hand resting loose near the reins. His hair was streaked with silver at the temples, tied back with no effort at show. He looked first at the wounded animal, then at Calder's knife, then at the rope. Last, he looked at the man holding all 3 things together. Eli swallowed. "Say something." "The elder did. You found him." His English was precise. Spare, not the broken, mocking version town men like to imitate after whiskey. Just quiet and exact. Calder nodded once, at the wash. The elder's gaze shifted to the leg wound. "Alive because of you." "Not yet." A younger rider to the left said something in Apache, clipped and low. His horse danced once beneath him. The elder answered without turning his head. One sentence, enough to still him. Eli leaned closer to Calder and spoke from the side of his mouth. "I don't like this." "You weren't meant to." The elder dismounted at last, not fast, not slow. He left his rifle in the saddle scabbard and came forward with empty hands, which in some men would have looked like peace and in others like confidence. In him it looked like both. He stopped a few paces from the horse. "This mark," he said, eyes on the flank, "was not made by us." Calder felt something shift under the words, not relief, something less useful than that. "You know it then." I know what it covers." The younger rider spoke sharply again. This time Calder heard the anger plain, even if the words themselves meant nothing to him. The elder listened. Then he turned his face slightly and answered in a tone that cut flatter than a blade. The younger man fell silent. Eli whispered, covering another mark, "That's what he means." Calder had guessed as much. Hair had grown over older scar tissue beneath the newer burn. Whoever had remarked the horse wanted its first name hidden. The elder looked at Calder. "Cut him loose." Eli stepped in at once. "Now wait just The elder did not even glance at him. "Cut him loose." The horse shifted toward Calder's shoulder, not the elder's. A strange, stubborn thing. Calder felt Eli's fear beside him like heat from a stove. "If I cut him," Calder said, "he'll fall." "He may," the elder said, "but if he stays tied, he breaks himself worse." That much was true. Calder crouched and reached for the knot. Eli grabbed his arm. "You don't even know them." Calder looked at the fingers on his sleeve until Eli let go. "I know the horse. That horse will get you killed." Calder's chest drew tight again, not from the lungs this time, just old anger, slow and tired. "No," he said, "men do that." He cut the rope. The horse lurched, nearly crumpled, then slammed its weight against Calder instead of the dirt. He took it full in the shoulder and had to brace hard to keep both of them upright. Pain flashed white along his ribs. The old burn in his chest seized. He bit down and kept hold of the halter. One of the younger riders stepped forward on instinct. Calder turned with the horse, putting his own body between them without thinking about it. The motion cost him another sharp breath. The elder noticed. So did everyone else. No one moved after that. For a moment there was only dust and the sound of the horse blowing fear through flared nostrils. Calder stroked the side of its neck. The animal shook but did not bolt. Its trust was narrow as a knife edge and twice as dangerous. The elder crouched near the injured leg. "Arrow cut first," he said after a moment. "Then stone." He ran after both. "Arrow," Eli said. "Who in blazes?" The elder rose. "Men who did not want him found." He finally looked at Eli, and Eli took an involuntary step back. It was not a cruel look, only one that had already measured him and set his weight accordingly. The elder's eyes returned to Calder. "There is a spring north of here, cottonwoods, shade, better ground to clean him." "Why not do it here?" Eli demanded. "Because the men who chased him know this ranch now." That settled over the yard heavier than thunder. Calder felt the rawhide strip in his pocket like a second pulse. One of the younger riders slid from the saddle and approached carefully, palms open toward the horse. The animal pinned its ears and leaned harder into Calder's side. The young man stopped at once. The elder watched that too. "You may keep your hand on him," he said. It was not a request. It was stranger than that. An allowance. Eli made a noise of disbelief. "Calder, don't be a fool. They take you up there, you may not come back down." The elder answered before Calder could. "If we wanted him gone, he would already be gone." Eli's mouth snapped shut. Calder looked from the riders to the horse, then toward the blackened fence posts along the far side of the yard. The wind moved through them with that same thin whistle, sounding too much like the roof beams had sounded before they caved in. He still hated that sound, hated how quickly fire made choice useless. 1 second you were saving what you could touch. The next you were only counting what the flames had decided to leave. He had promised himself after that day he would never again step willingly toward trouble wearing another man's shape. Then the horse turned its head and pressed its jaw against his shoulder, as if the choice had already been made. Calder reached into his pocket and closed his fingers around the rawhide strip. "Eli," he said, "no. If I'm not back by dark, bar the house. Keep the stock close to the south pen, and don't let anyone touch the barn." Eli stared. "You can't mean this." Calder met his eyes at last. "I already do." "You don't owe them." "Didn't say I did." "You owe yourself better than walking into a trap." At that, Calder almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was late, a little useless. Men like him had stopped owing themselves better a long time ago. What remained after that was simpler. You either did the thing in front of you, or you learned how to sleep beside not doing it. He lifted the rawhide strip from his pocket. This was tied in the mane. The elder's face did not change, but something in the riders behind him tightened. "You opened it?" the elder asked. "No." "Why not?" Calder looked down at the oil-darkened fold. "Because it wasn't mine." The elder held his gaze for a long second, then he nodded once. "Now," he said, "it may be." He extended his hand. Calder hesitated only a breath before placing the folded strip in it. The elder untied it carefully. Inside was a smaller piece of buckskin, marked not with words, but with a rough map line burned by hot wire or coal. A creek bend, a stand of rock. A square that might have been a building once. At the edge of the map was the same hidden symbol Calder had seen under the false brand, and beside it another mark, older, straighter, deliberate. The elder turned the buckskin so Calder could see. "Do you know this place?" Calder did, not at first as a map, as a memory of shape, the bend of Little Rook Creek where it narrowed between two shelves of limestone, the low stone foundation left from a trading post gone before he was born. The north pasture of his own ranch sat just below it. Yes. The elder folded the buckskin once more. "Then you know why men have started hunting horses they did not raise." Eli swore under his breath. Calder felt the first hard edge of it then. This was not about a single stolen animal, not fully. The horse had been carrying something more dangerous than pain, direction, proof. A trail hidden in flesh and rawhide, running toward land that men already lied about wanting. "What's there?" he asked. The elder's eyes shifted toward the north ridge, toward Calder's pasture beyond it. "Something buried," he said, "something witnessed, and men who burned one place before may burn another." The words landed low and cold. Calder did not move, but his lungs tightened the way they always did before smoke that wasn't there. Eli heard it too. "No," he said, voice rising. "No, you take your horse and your secrets and ride on. You keep that trouble off this ranch." The younger rider, who had spoken earlier, said something sharp in Apache. Eli flinched, and this time Calder did laugh, just once, humorless and dry. The elder silenced his man with a glance, then looked back at Calder. "There are others coming," he said. "Not ours. The horse escaped them. If they find the mark beneath the false one, they will know he reached someone who can read what they tried to hide." Calder thought of the men who had ridden his fence at night these past weeks. The distant silhouettes, the missing length of wire at the north line. He had told himself it was scavengers or drifters cutting through. Easier to believe in small meanness than organized hunger. He should have known better. Eli grabbed Calder's sleeve again. "Listen to me. The law can handle this." Calder turned slowly. "Which law?" Eli opened his mouth. and found nothing in it. That was answer enough. The elder stepped back toward his horse. We move now. Calder nodded once. Eli stared at him as if betrayal had changed shape and learned his friend's face. You go with them, he said. You choose them over your own. Calder let the words sit. Then he shook his head. No, he said. I choose the truth over whatever's been using my land. He took the lead rope from where it trailed, shortened it, and started walking. The horse limped beside him, not well, not cleanly, but forward. The elder mounted. The others fell into place around Calder, not crowding, not loose either. A moving wall, not prison, not safety, something between. At the edge of the yard, Calder glanced back once. Eli stood in the dirt beside the trough, one hand hanging useless at his side, the other still half lifted, as if argument might yet find another shape. Behind him, the barn doors stood open to shadow. The house beyond looked smaller than usual, all hard boards and patched glass, a thing a man built because he needed walls, not because he believed walls could keep much out. Calder faced north. The ride to the spring began on open ground, then narrowed through broken cedar and wash-cut stone, where the path climbed in pale switchbacks. Calder walked more than rode at first, so the horse could favor its leg. One of the younger Apache riders moved ahead and cut a straight branch for a splint without being asked. Another rode back downslope once, circling wide to erase sign where they could. Efficient men, no wasted talk. At the cottonwoods they watered the horse, cleaned the wound, and bound it with strips torn from an old shirt one of the riders carried in his saddlebag. The elder worked with quick, certain hands. Calder knelt to steady the animal's head and said nothing. The horse trembled through the whole thing but never struck out. Once, when the pain bit deepest, it shoved its muzzle into Calder's chest and nearly dropped him backward. Still choosing you, one of the younger men said in English. He was the first among them to sound almost amused. Calder rubbed the horse's jaw. Poor judgment. The young man's mouth twitched once and was still again. The elder gave Calder a look that held the smallest weight of approval. His name is Nanton. Calder glanced up. The horse. Yes. He laid a palm briefly on the animal's neck. Nanton, the horse, lifted his head as if the sound belonged there. The young rider who had spoken earlier stepped closer. And you? Calder Rusk. The young man nodded once. I am Tewa. He gestured toward the other silent rider, broad-shouldered and scarred across one cheek. Dober. The scarred man acknowledged Calder with a tilt of the chin and resumed scanning the ridges. Last, the elder tied off the bandage and rose. I am Sani. Calder stood as well. You knew my land from that map. Sani rinsed blood from his hands in the spring and watched the current carry pink threads downstream. I knew the line men drew over it later, he said. That is different. Calder waited. Sani reached into his coat and took out the buckskin map again. Long ago, before your fence posts, before the county papers, there was a stone house at Little Rook. Traders, then soldiers, then no one, but one ledger remained. A ledger. A list, Sani said. Names, horse counts, trade, payments, agreements made and broken, enough to shame men whose sons now wear coats and call themselves lawful. Calder's eyes stayed on the buckskin, and it's buried on my land. Near it, perhaps under it now, men searching for Nanton believed he could lead them back to the place. How? The mark beneath the false brand is not only a clan sign, It was used as a trail sign long ago, one part of a set. Men who knew the old agreements would know what land the horse was bred to cross and return to. Calder considered the animal, head lowered now, steam rising faint from his flanks in the cooling air. Someone had risked much to hide that mark. Someone else had risked more to preserve it, and all of it had wandered bleeding into his yard. Tewa said, the men chasing him were not all white. Sani nodded. Greed speaks many languages. Calder almost said that fear did too, but the words stayed put. They moved again before sunset. This time Calder rode one of the spare horses Dober led, and Nanton was led carefully between them. The path turned narrower, harder. Juniper thickened. Shadows gathered in cuts of stone before the sky had finished with the day. As they climbed, Calder saw more signs of passage than a casual rider would have. An old fire ring hidden in brush, a snapped twig angled wrong, a flattened patch of grass where two horses had been kept waiting not many hours before. Dober noticed him noticing. He grunted once. You track. I ranch. Dober accepted that as overlap enough. Darkness came in layers. First the gold went out of the rocks, then the blue settled under cedar branches, then the ridges turned to shapes with no edges. They did not light a fire when they stopped in a narrow hollow screened by stone. Nanton was bedded on blankets and checked again. Sani gave him a pinch of something bitter-smelling from a leather pouch, and the horse finally eased into a shallow, restless quiet. Calder sat with his back to a boulder and listened to the night. Coyotes somewhere far off, wind in the grass, the faint wet crackle in his own lungs when he breathed too deep. He had not traveled with company in years, not real company. Drovers and buyers were noise. Eli was neighborly habit more than companionship. This was different. Men saying little because little was needed. Men whose eyes never stopped reading the dark. He found he trusted silence more easily than charm. Tewa crouched across from him, cleaning an arrowhead with a scrap of hide. Young face, old eyes, not hard in the way cruel men became, hard in the way ground does when too many hooves pass over it. You think we lie, Tewa said. Calder looked at him over the dim line of his knees. I think everyone keeps the peace that serves them. Tewa considered that, including you. Especially me. A small pause, then Tewa nodded. Good. From the far side of the hollow, Sani said, sleep if you can. Calder closed his eyes. He did not sleep, not fully. The night gave him back the old things in fragments, orange under black, beam shadow. The choking roar of a roof deciding gravity was stronger than a man's arms. He was back in the barn fire without warning, as he sometimes still was, boots slipping in spilled grain, smoke so thick it felt alive, his wife Mara coughing somewhere beyond the stall wall, then not coughing anymore. He had reached the door with a blanket over his face, and a hand burned raw to the wrist, and found only air where she should have been. After that came flame. After that came the kind of silence that remakes a man badly. He woke with his hand half closed and his throat raw. No one commented. Sani was already standing above him, watching the eastern ridge pale. We ride before light takes shape, he said. They broke camp in minutes. By dawn they were moving along the high shelf above Little Rook Creek. From there Calder could see his north pasture in the distance, washed small and silver by morning. Strange how land looked from above. Less owned, more temporary. Fence lines became scratches. Houses became toys. Men vanished entirely unless they moved. Sani reined in where the shelf narrowed and pointed with his chin toward a stand of cottonwoods far below. Stone house foundation there. Calder followed the line. He could just make out a rectangle of darker ground under the trees. The old trading post remains. He had ridden past it 100 times and never gone near. Too little water, too many snakes, no reason. Tewa came back from scouting ahead at a trot. Tracks, he said, fresh, 5 horses, 1 mule. Doba swore softly. Sani asked one question in Apache. Tewa answered with 2 words and a gesture toward the west cut. Calder did not need translation for that much. Someone was already headed to Little Rook. We can beat them there, he asked. Maybe, Tewa said. Sani looked at Calder. If they find the place first, they will not search gently. Calder stared down at the cottonwoods, at the dark line of creek. At the land he had called his, because someone once sold it on paper, and he had worked it with both hands until the claim felt honest. Work had a way of disguising theft, especially when the theft was old, and the hands doing it believed themselves clean. He thought of Eli saying the law could handle it, thought of the men in town who nodded to him on market days and spoke of boundaries as if ink could make history behave. Thought of the false brand seared over an older truth and how easy it had been to miss until blood and fear stripped the surface away. His mouth felt dry. If there's a ledger, he said, and it names what was taken. It names men, Sani said, and agreements, and the price of betrayal. And if those men's sons are in county offices now. Sani's face did not change. Then the paper matters more than the soil. Calder almost smiled at the bitterness of that, not because it was new, because it was familiar. They left Nanton hidden in a cedar pocket with Doba standing guard and rode hard for the creek. The shelf dropped into a chute of loose rock that forced them single file. Calder's horse slid twice before finding footing. Dust rose around them in pale sheets. Ahead, Tewa moved like a man poured into the saddle, low and balanced. Sani came behind Calder, saying nothing, which somehow made it easier to keep going. Halfway down they heard it, metal on stone, a muffled shout, then the crack of a shovel striking rock again. They dismounted before the trees and tied off in shadow. Tewa disappeared first, bow in hand. Doba was not with them, but Calder had the sense of him still somehow near, a kind of absence that watched. Sani motioned Calder forward along the creek bank, using the noise of water to mask their steps. Through the cottonwoods, Calder saw them, 5 men, 1 mule, a wagon tongue left up against a stump, 2 men digging near the old foundation while another held the reins and watched the tree line. The last 2 worked at prying up flat stones with iron bars, not lawmen, not ranch hands either. Hard-faced in the hungry way of men who had learned that a little violence now saved effort later. One of them turned enough for Calder to see the side of his coat. A deputy's tan duster, not official issue maybe, but close enough to turn the stomach. Sani leaned near Calder's shoulder and spoke so low the words barely touched air. Do you know him? Calder narrowed his eyes. Yes. The name came bitter and immediate. Harlan Creed, deputy when it suited him, collector when it paid better, the kind of man who smiled only when someone weaker had made a mistake. Another man at the dig site lifted something from the ground, only a rusted hinge, nothing more, and cursed. Harlan took it, flung it aside, and said, "Keep digging, it was marked here." Calder felt his pulse strike once, hard, marked here, not guessed, not hoped. Known. Tewa reappeared at Sani's far side soundlessly as a shadow, 2 fingers lifted to signal he had circled the others and found no one more. Sani's eyes stayed on Harlan Creed. "There is still time to leave," he said to Calder. Ride home, say nothing, this becomes our matter. Calder kept looking through the trees, at the deputy's coat, at the shovels cutting into ground near his own north boundary, at men willing to tear up old stone to keep old theft buried. Home, the word did not feel simple anymore. He thought of Nanton collapsing against him the moment the rope was cut, thought of Mara in the smoke, of all the things fire had taken before he could choose them back, thought of the rawhide strip he had not opened because it was not his until truth made it so. Sani said nothing further. He was giving Calder the last clean chance to walk away. Calder watched Harlan Creed kick aside another stone and spit into the dirt, as if the whole land existed only to answer him. Then Calder reached down, picked up a fist-sized rock from the creek bank, and weighed it once in his palm. When he looked at Sani, his voice was quiet enough to belong to the morning. "No," he said. "It became mine the minute they crossed my pasture to bury a lie." And before Sani could answer, Calder stepped out from the cottonwoods and into the clearing. Harlan Creed looked up first, not startled, not slow either, just turned his head as if he'd been expecting a man to step out of the trees eventually, and it made no difference which man it was. "Well now," he said, straightening from the pit, "if it ain't Calder Rusk." The others shifted, hands moving without quite reaching for guns. They watched Calder the way men watch something that might still turn into trouble if given reason. Calder did not hurry. He walked into the clearing with the rock still in his hand, then let it fall loose at his side. His eyes moved once over the ground they'd opened, fresh-cut earth, stones pried aside, the dark mouth of something older beneath, then back to Harlan. "You're digging on my land," Calder said. Harlan smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "County land, last I checked." Calder said nothing to that, just let the words hang and rot on their own. Behind him, unseen but not unfelt, Sani and Tewa had shifted into position. Calder didn't turn, didn't need to. He could feel the space tighten, like a rope drawn but not yet pulled. Harlan wiped his hands on his coat. "You come to complain, or you come to help?" "Neither." "Then you come to watch." Harlan glanced toward the half-open pit. "You picked a poor time. There ain't much to see yet." One of the men in the hole struck something harder than dirt. The sound rang dull and hollow. Everyone paused. Harlan's eyes flicked down, then back to Calder. "Unless you've got business here, I suggest you head on back to that patch of yours and keep your nose where it belongs." Calder took one more step forward. The man holding the mule shifted his grip on the reins. Harlan's smile thinned. "Careful." Calder's voice stayed level. "You followed a horse onto my land." Harlan's expression changed just a fraction. Not surprise, recognition. "Did I?" "You marked it," Calder said. "Wrong mark over the right one." One of the men near the pit stiffened. Harlan didn't look at him. "You're talking yourself into a hole you can't climb out of." Calder's chest tightened, breath catching sharp for a second before he forced it steady. He didn't take his eyes off Harlan. "You burned one place already," he said. "You aiming to do it again when this doesn't go your way?" That landed, not loudly, but deep enough. Harlan's smile vanished altogether. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know smoke," Calder said. "I know the smell of it before it starts." A flicker crossed one of the men's faces, guilt or memory, Calder couldn't tell which. Harlan stepped closer, boots grinding into the dirt between them. "You're a rancher," he said quietly, "not a lawman, not a historian, not anything that concerns what's buried here." Calder met him where he stood. "No," he said, just the man who's been living on top of it. Silence pressed in. Behind Harlan, the man in the pit shifted again, scraping dirt aside with his hands now, urgency creeping into his movements. The hollow sound had changed something. Greed had a way of quickening when it felt close to proof. Harlan's gaze slid past Calder for the first time, scanning the tree line. "Not long, just enough. You bring company?" he asked. Calder didn't answer. That was answer enough. Harlan's jaw tightened. He turned slightly, calling over his shoulder, "Finish it." The men moved faster now. One dropped to his knees, clawing at packed earth. Another levered a stone free with a grunt. The outline of something took shape beneath the soil, flat, rectangular, a lid. Calder felt the shift in the air like a storm rolling low. Sani stepped from the trees then, not with a rush, not with a threat. Just walked into the open like he belonged there more than any of them. Tewa appeared to his right, silent and steady. Harlan's men froze. Harlan turned fully this time, eyes narrowing. "Well," he said softly, "now we see the rest of it." Sani looked not at Harlan, but at the ground they had opened. "You have found what you were not meant to keep," he said. Harlan laughed once. "And you've come to claim it. That's convenient." "It was never yours," Sani said. "Everything's someone's once it's dug up," Harlan replied. "That's how this works." "No," Sani said. "That is how it ends." The words settled heavy. One of Harlan's men spat. "We're not walking away from this." Tewa's gaze shifted to him, not angry, not heated, just measuring. Harlan lifted a hand, stilling his men without looking. His attention stayed on Sani. "You got proof?" he asked. Sani gestured once to the half-buried lid. "It is inside." Harlan smiled again, slow and sharp. "Then I guess we'll be the ones to read it." Calder stepped forward. "Not before I do." Harlan turned his head slightly, just enough to look at him from the side. "You think this concerns you that much?" Calder's voice didn't rise. "You said it didn't. That's reason enough." For a moment no one moved. Then Harlan nodded once, as if something had settled inside him. "Fine," he said. "Let's settle it clean." He stepped back and gestured to the pit. "You want to see what's down there? Go on, open it." One of his men laughed under his breath. Calder didn't look at them. He stepped to the edge of the hole. The lid was old timber bound with rusted iron straps. The earth around it had been packed hard, as if someone had meant it to stay hidden longer than any of them would live. Calder crouched, fingers brushing dirt aside. The wood felt solid. Too solid. He glanced once at Sani. Sani gave the smallest nod. Calder set both hands on the edge and pulled. The lid shifted with a deep, dragging groan. For a second nothing happened. Then the seal broke. Air rushed in from below, cold, stale, carrying a smell that wasn't rot and wasn't earth. Something older, closed away too long. Calder pushed harder. The lid slid back. Inside lay a wrapped bundle, oilcloth dark with age but intact. Beside it, a smaller wooden box, corners reinforced with iron. Harlan leaned in behind him. "Well now." Greed had stripped the last of his patience clean. Calder reached down first. Harlan's hand came down on his shoulder. "Careful," he said. "We do this fair." Calder didn't look back. "You don't know fair." Harlan's grip tightened. Tewa shifted. So did Harlan's men. The balance tipped. Sani's voice cut through it, quiet and absolute. "Let him take it." Harlan hesitated, just long enough. Then he let go. Calder lifted the oilcloth bundle and set it on the ground. His hands moved steady, though his chest had tightened again, breath shallow from the strain and something else pressing in. He unwrapped it. Inside lay a ledger. Leather-bound, cracked with age, edges darkened but preserved. The world seemed to narrow to that one object. Harlan crouched opposite him, eyes locked on it. Open it. Calder didn't move. Sani stepped closer. This is where you decide what kind of man you are. Calder's fingers rested on the cover. He thought of Eli, of the house, of the fence lines he had repaired board by board until they felt like truth simply because they held. He thought of Mara, of the fire, of the way everything you believed could be taken from you faster than breath, and of the horse. Choosing him, he opened the ledger. The first page crackled as it gave. Names, columns, dates, entries written in careful, deliberate hand, trade agreements, land markers, transfers, payments, and then a signature, not his, but the name was Rusk, his father's. Calder's throat went tight. The entry was clear enough even through time-worn ink. Land granted under condition, temporary, bound to agreement with Apache signatories, not sale, not ownership, custodianship, until terms fulfilled. Below it another entry, terms never completed, status unresolved. Calder sat back slowly. Harlan leaned closer, eyes scanning the page, then the next. His expression shifted from hunger to calculation. "Well," he said, "that complicates things." Calder looked at him. "No," he said, "it clears them." Harlan's gaze sharpened. "You think that means you get to keep it?" "I think it means I never did." That landed harder than anything before. Even Tewa stilled. Sani watched Calder without blinking. Harlan stood, dusting his hands. "Then I suppose that makes it easy." He drew his revolver, not fast, not dramatic, just inevitable. "If it ain't yours," he said, "then it ain't his either." He jerked his chin towards Sani. "It's nobody's, which means it's whoever can hold it." The others followed. Steel came free. Tewa moved, bow half raised. Sani didn't. He only watched Calder, waiting, not for a fight, for a choice. Calder closed the ledger slowly. The weight of it felt different now, not heavy, certain. Behind him, the creek moved steady over stone, indifferent to men and their claims. In front of him, Harlan Creed stood with a gun and a lie dressed up as law. Calder rose. He held the ledger in one hand, empty in the other. And for the first time since the horse had stumbled into his life, the decision in front of him wasn't about survival. It was about truth, and what it cost to carry it. Harlan Creed's revolver stayed steady, not shaking, not eager, just certain, the kind of certainty that didn't come from courage but from habit. Calder stood with the ledger in his hand and felt that difference clear as daylight. Behind Harlan, the men shifted into position, not disciplined, not clean, but practiced enough in bad work to know where to stand when things turned. Tewa's bow lifted a fraction higher. Doba moved somewhere unseen, circling. Sani did not move at all. He only watched Calder, waiting. The choice had come, not the one about the horse, not the one about riding north. This one. Calder drew a breath that caught halfway in his chest. The burn there tightened, a familiar pressure, like something trying to close over what little air remained. He ignored it. Pain had long ago stopped being something that guided him. Truth did that now, or tried to. Harlan tipped the barrel of his revolver toward the ledger, set it down. Calder didn't. "You think this ends with you walking out of here holding that?" Harlan asked. "No," Calder said. "Then you understand." "I understand enough." Harlan smiled faintly. "Then don't make me do something that'll trouble your neighbors more than it troubles me." Calder glanced once at the ground they'd opened. The disturbed earth. The broken stone, the place where something meant to hold truth, had been buried long enough to become dangerous again the moment it was seen. He thought of Eli, of the way the man had stood in the yard, caught between fear and something like loyalty. He thought of the fence lines, of every post he'd driven, every repair made after storm or drought, work that had felt like ownership because it cost him something to keep. Now he knew better. Ownership wasn't work, it was truth, and truth had just told him he'd been living on borrowed ground. Harlan's voice cut in again. Last chance. Calder looked at him. You want this? He asked quietly. Harlan didn't hesitate. Yes. Then you come take it. The silence that followed stretched tight. Harlan's eyes hardened. You're tired, he said. You don't breathe right. You're standing in a hole you can't fight your way out of. Calder almost nodded. Every word of that was true. He didn't breathe right. His lungs burned with every pull of air. His hands weren't as fast as they used to be, and he was outnumbered. But none of that had anything to do with what came next. He lowered the ledger, not to the ground, to his side, where it stayed. I'm not fighting you for it, Calder said. Harlan blinked once, thrown just enough to show it. No. No. Harlan's smile came back thin and sharp. Good, then we're. I'm not giving it to you either. That stopped him, for real this time. Harlan's head tilted slightly. Then what exactly do you think you're doing? Calder looked past him, at Sani, at Tewa, at the trees, at the land itself. I'm finishing what should have been finished, he said, and then he turned, not toward the trees, not toward safety, toward the creek. Harlan moved first. Don't. Calder stepped forward and threw the ledger, not away, into the water. The book hit the current with a heavy slap, sank halfway, then caught in the slow bend where the creek deepened. For a second, no one moved, then everything did. Harlan shouted, lunging forward, "Get it!" Two men bolted for the water. Tewa's arrow snapped through the air, striking one man's shoulder before he reached the bank. The second stumbled, slipped on the wet stones, and went down hard. Harlan fired. The shot cracked sharp and fast. Calder felt the impact before he heard it, a blunt, brutal force against his side that drove the breath from his lungs in a single, empty rush. He staggered, did not fall, not yet. Sani moved, not fast, not wild. Just stepped into Harlan's line, his hand rising in one smooth motion. Harlan fired again. The shot went wide. Doba came out of nowhere. One moment not there. The next, inside the space between men, his hand striking Harlan's wrist, twisting hard. The revolver dropped. Tewa loosed another arrow. This one hit dirt at a man's feet, stopping him cold. The creek churned where the ledger had caught. Calder dropped to one knee. The world narrowed, sound dulled. The burn in his lungs became something else now, deeper, sharper, threaded with something wet and wrong. He pressed his hand to his side. Blood, warm, too much. Across the clearing, Harlan struggled against Doba, rage breaking through his control at last. You think this changes anything? He spat. You think throwing it away makes it yours? Sani's voice cut through it. No, he said, it makes it free. Harlan laughed, breathless and harsh. Free doesn't hold in court. No, Sani said again, but truth does not ask court for permission. The men near the creek scrambled, reaching for the ledger where it had wedged against stone. The water pulled at it, soaking the leather, dragging ink into slow ruin. Calder saw that, felt it. Something in his chest eased despite the pain. The truth was written, but it did not belong to paper. It belonged to what men chose after reading it. Harlan saw it too, and something broke behind his eyes. He drove his elbow back, striking Doba, breaking the hold just enough to lunge for the fallen revolver. Calder moved, not fast, not strong, but enough. He pushed off the ground and stepped into Harlan's path, one hand catching the man's coat, dragging him off balance. The gun went off. The shot tore into dirt. Doba slammed into him again. Tewa's bow came up. And this time no one moved after that, not Harlan, not his men. The balance had shifted for good. Calder sagged back, the strength going out of his legs. Sani was there before he hit the ground, hands steady, eyes clear. "You chose," Sani said quietly. Calder tried to answer, coughed instead. Blood touched his lips. "Seems that way," he managed. Sani nodded once. "Good." The ride back was slow, slower than Calder liked, but faster than he could manage on his own. He drifted in and out of the world as they moved, the rhythm of the horse beneath him the only constant. Pain came in waves, not sharp anymore, just deep and spreading. They had bound his side tight, stopped the worst of it, but not all. Nanton walked beside him, close. The horse had insisted on that, even injured, even weak, still choosing. Calder found that fitting. By the time they reached the edge of his ranch, the sun had begun to fall. Eli was waiting, standing in the yard with a rifle he held wrong, too tight, like he expected it to decide things for him. When he saw Calder, he ran forward. What happened? Calder slid from the saddle with help he didn't remember asking for. "Bad men made a poor decision," he said. Eli looked past him at Sani, at Tewa, at the others. "And these good men made a better one." Eli stared, then nodded. Once, that was enough. They carried Calder inside, set him on the bed he had built with his own hands. The room smelled like wood and dust, and the faint trace of smoke that never quite left. Sani worked the wound again, cleaned it, bound it tighter. Calder gritted his teeth through it, did not cry out. He had done enough of that in other years. When it was finished, Sani stepped back. "You will live," he said. Calder exhaled slowly. "That's usually how it goes." Sani studied him. "You gave up your claim." Calder closed his eyes. "Wasn't mine to give. Most men would not have done that." Calder opened one eye. "Most men don't get shown the truth that clear." Sani nodded. "That is why most men stay where they are." Calder let that settle. Eli hovered near the door, uncertain. "What happens now?" he asked. Sani looked at him, then at Calder. "Now," he said, "we return what was held." Word spread, it always did, faster than truth, cleaner than justice. By the time Calder could stand without the room tilting, the story had already taken shape in town. Some said he'd been shot defending his land, some said he'd lost it, some said he'd gone mad and thrown away proof that would have made him rich. None of them got it right. Calder didn't bother correcting them. The land changed, not all at once, not cleanly. Lines shifted. Agreements were spoken where papers had once lied. Sani returned with others, men who remembered, men who carried the older truth in ways no ledger ever could. They did not take the ranch. They did not need to. They set boundaries, shared ones, clear, honest. Calder's land became smaller, but it became his. For the first time, Eli complained about it for a week, then stopped, because even he could see the difference. The quiet changed, not gone, just settled. The nights came easier. The wind didn't sound like warning anymore. Nanton healed, slow, steady, the leg never fully right, but strong enough. The horse stayed, not tied, never tied again, just stayed. One morning, weeks later, Calder stepped out onto the porch and found Sani waiting by the fence. No horse, no escort, just the man. "You are standing," Sani said, "most days." Sani nodded. "Then it is time." "For what?" Sani stepped aside. Behind him stood a young boy, maybe 10, thin, quiet, watching everything. "This is Liko," Sani said. "His father is gone. His mother cannot keep him where we travel now." Calder looked at the boy. The boy looked back, not afraid, not trusting either, just waiting. "You saved what was ours," Sani said. Calder said nothing. Sani rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Now we return what was yours." Calder felt something shift, not in his chest, deeper, something that had been empty too long to name. He looked at the boy again, at the way he stood, still, watching, choosing. Calder nodded once. "All right," he said. The boy stepped forward, not fast, not slow, just certain. Sani turned to leave. Calder stopped him. "That ledger," he said, "gone for good." Sani paused, looked back. "Paper fades," he said, "truth does not." Then he walked away. Calder stood in the yard with the boy beside him and the horse grazing near the fence. The land stretched out in front of him, different now, honest, hard, his, and for the first time since the fire had taken everything he thought he owned. Calder Rusk did not feel like he was standing alone. If this story stayed with you, ride with us again. Subscribe and help keep these frontier tales alive for the next file at night. Because out here, every name has a past, every trail has a cost, and every sunset still remembers. Until next time, friend, keep your hat tipped to the past and your heart pointed west.